Hello, kia ora, and welcome to the Creative Matters podcast, where we have inspiring conversations with artists from Aotearoa, New Zealand. I'm your host, Mandy Jakic. Hi, and thank you for joining me again for the Creative Matters podcast. And if you're a new listener, a very warm welcome to you. This is episode 104, and I'm speaking with Joshua Davison. Joshua is a contemporary artist from Tāmaki Makaurau Auckland, with a diverse body of work in both realism portraiture and sculptural painting. Josh is a self-taught artist who has developed personal techniques which he uses throughout his impasto and sculptural paintings, such as a methodical palette knife technique, layering MDF like a topographical map, making moulds, and piping modelling paste. Joshua talks about how he strives for originality and how experimenting with different media and techniques, stretching his own canvases, making his own frames, and making the tools he uses contributes to finding his own unique style. We have a very candid conversation about dropping out of Elam Art School after 1 year and how he still went on to become a full-time successful artist. We talk about pricing and the big prices his work is commanding, and his so-called failure at his first Art in the Park event and what he learnt from that. He shares parts of his unique painting process and his connection to realism, surrealism, and portraiture, as well as nature. Josh has some really great tips and perspectives as a young emerging artist in New Zealand. I'm sure you'll find his story super inspiring. Hi, Josh.
Hi, Mandy.
It's lovely to have you in Muriwai. Welcome to the Creative Matters podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. It is lovely.
Yeah, and you've never been to Muriwai, I hear.
I have not. No, first time.
Which is amazing. You'll have to go down and have a swim after the interview.
Brought my togs.
Good. Just make sure you're safe. Swim between the flags.
Indeed.
So it's lovely to have you here. I am so intrigued to hear more about your practice and process. I think that you are incredibly talented. And it's going to be so interesting actually talking to somebody who is creating work that feels so unique. And I'm sure all of the listeners are dying to hear about your process.
Well, thank you. I'm very grateful to be here and excited to talk in depth about my work.
Yeah, great. Okay, so let's go back to the beginning. You were born, or you grew up in Glendowie.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us a little bit about your childhood and when you got into making?
Well, I didn't have the most creative childhood. I wasn't really exposed to any art until later in my life, but there were signs. I was a bit of a perfectionist in primary school, and I had an older half sister who took care of us all the time, and she was a great drawer. So I think that was my first introduction to art, and I was fascinated and in awe of her. And I would ask her to draw me certain Pokemon and cartoons and that, and I think that had an impression on me, and that definitely was ingrained in my psyche. And so I did most of college without doing any sort of art. I was a bit distractible and focused more on my social life and other things, but I was always doing maths and physics, and with the intention of eventually studying architecture. But I was never too passionate about either or. I was merely doing that because I didn't really have many other options. And I made it to year 13, my last year of college at Sacred Heart, and I decided physics wasn't my thing anymore. It was mainly due to the fact that my two closest friends at the time weren't doing it anymore, and I was alone in the class, and which is a bit petty, but I decided on a whim to drop out of that subject, and went to the careers advisor, and she gave me a couple of options, one of them being painting. I chose that partway through the last year, and then spent the next 10 months painting and learning the ropes, and I was pretty enthralled to begin with, and I wasn't very good, but just followed the teacher's lead.
So that's quite interesting, isn't it, that you spent that year, your final year at school, and sort of discovered painting and realised that you were actually quite passionate about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was the first thing that I had come across that I was passionate about, and I think that showed, and that I spent countless hours painting, even though it may not have been for school. I was always painting. And I think it was a no-brainer at the end of college to apply for a fine arts degree at university. So I went for Elam and applied for Elam, got in. I spent a year at Elam and I learnt a lot. It was great for my critical thinking and especially thinking outside the box in terms of art. I felt that they had this mindset around art where one should challenge what they deem as art, and I admired that. I thought it was very interesting, and I saw some very interesting projects, and I was doing things that I never thought I would in terms of, it made me a lot more creative for sure. But the issue that I had was that I wasn't painting. I didn't actually pick up a paintbrush in that year. And at the time, I had this urge just to paint and to start making large-scale works. So 2 weeks into my second year, I decided to drop out. And my mindset was I could spend the next 3 years getting my honours degree, or I could spend the next 3 years just painting and teaching myself. And I think the idea of a student loan had an influence on that as well. So I dropped out, and I mean, all the way through uni, that first year, I was making work. I was doing mainly portraiture, but it was taking too long, and I was spending months at a time on a single piece. So dropping out was very helpful in that sense, and I just started experimenting and making all kinds of different work.
And the work at that time, the paintings that you were making, what were they like?
Well, my opinion of them these days isn't too high, but they were vital in my development as an artist, for sure. They were kind of surrealist. There were some astronomy paintings that I did, which I'm actually picking up again now. And overall, they were okay. I think the technique was pretty rough, and looking back at them now, I can see the faults, and I can see that I didn't layer my work. I didn't block in any color. But the concepts were there, and some of them I am a fan of still, but some of them I can't really look at.
It was quite a lot of portraiture as well at that stage.
Yeah, I think I started off with portraiture and in the beginning, and then after uni, I continued portraiture and planets. That was it.
So interesting. I'd love to see a picture of the planet paintings.
Yeah, they're pretty rough. They're done on 3mm MDF, so they're wobbly and not a whole lot I can do with them, but I've still got them.
Yeah, that's good. So that, to make that decision to leave and to think, actually, I'm going to pursue my art practice myself and teach myself what I need to know, that kind of does take a bit of guts. So what do you think sort of armed you with that self-confidence that you could do this?
Yeah, I had this confidence and this, it was naivety, but it was needed at the time that I could do this and I could make it as an artist. And I thought it was a whole lot easier than it actually is. But I definitely needed that at the time. And I had some initial success, which really helped, and that the first few paintings I made were sold for, at the time, it was a lot of money to me, and it went straight back into funding more paintings. But yeah, I held this belief that that it was possible, and I think it is. I know that it is possible. I think at the time I was just young and a little naive, but
it served you well.
It did, yeah.
Which is amazing, and it's actually a lovely, it's inspiring for people to hear that you can do it if you put your mind to it, and obviously have some talent that helps.
Yeah.
So you've got that natural talent, and then do you feel like it was a big part of that learning was just making?
Yeah, exactly. I was just devoted. I was persistent, and I think that's one of the most important things. Sure, talent comes into it, but honing a skill set and just persistence is vital. And I think anyone who wants to do art as a career just has to keep working at it and find ways to stay motivated and to keep things fresh. And yeah, I always found that coming up with new concepts and diving into making myself sort of uncomfortable with artworks was key, because you're always discovering new things when you do that. And yeah, my mindset back then was, and it still is today, was to think of a concept, make the canvases and the paintings, which I would do by hand, and then throw myself at it and don't do much. I didn't do much planning or anything, but I found the pressure of already having made the canvas or the board. I found that pressure to then make a beautiful artwork or fulfill what I had imagined for the painting. That always helped me and kept me motivated.
Yeah, I can understand that. So you've already kind of invested in this painting just from the roots.
Yeah.
And created your own canvas, which is amazing in itself, and we can talk about that later.
Yeah.
So were you kind of allowing yourself time to experiment and play and just sort of, see what happened, or were you actually really wanting to create final works that then you could sell?
At the beginning, it was more experimentation, and I wasn't thinking about sales or anything like that. They came naturally. But I think just experimenting, and that can be done through an intention to finish and finalize a work. I've held that mindset to this day. I think I don't do many practice drawings or drafts or designs. Even I tend to do most of that work in my head, and I'll dwell on a project and add certain components to it or take things away and try and get a real sense of the composition before starting. But the extent of the planning is all done in my head, really.
And you spent that first couple of years developing your ideas around portraiture and some of the surreal works. And then at some point you discovered more sort of a botanical theme. How did that come about?
Yeah, so those first few years I was teaching myself sort of techniques for portraiture and traditional works and how to properly layer, but I would always follow these artists that did impasto works and heavy textured paintings, and that has always caught my attention more than these traditional ways like landscapes and portraits. And so I started to experiment with heavy texture, and I got to a point where I had done a bit of traveling. I'd come back with a fairly fresh slate, and I decided that if I was going to progress as an artist, I would have to come up with a plan. And so I decided on a theme for my work, and I figured that in order to achieve a solo show or even sign with a gallery, which I hadn't had any experience with that yet, I would rather have made an exhibition and finished everything than just be sending out my portfolio and hoping that a gallery bites. So I spent another 2 years. I spent from 2018 to 2020 making work, and I chose a theme which was botany and flowers and portraiture. And I started to experiment with impasto painting at the same time, which started out very rough, very sort of what you'd expect from a palette knife painting with heavy oil paints, and slowly developed this technique and refined it, and this perfectionist side came out where I wanted these strokes to be perfect. And with each piece, because I was taking fairly big leaps between artworks and doing entirely different concepts, that I came across these, what's now the black flower wheel, which is an impasto flower done in a very clean manner, which was the most popular work I'd done to date. This work was something that for the first time I hadn't seen online, or I hadn't, taken parts from, which I think every artist does, that I felt like I had got to this point on my own.
Yeah.
And it was partly due to creating work in a semi-vacuum in as healthy a way as possible. But I think that is, to tangent, that is a pretty vital thing for any beginning artist to do, is that we have access to art at every moment of the day. It's at our fingertips. We can look at any painting basically in recent history. And if you're an artist on Instagram, you're looking at artworks and you're constantly being recommended new videos and styles, and you're seeing some of the best artists in the world, and it can be pretty overwhelming and demotivating in some ways. So this period I spent virtually off social media. I didn't look at other artworks. I didn't try and gain inspiration. I just focused on developing this style and this technique especially.
And were you thinking at that stage that you really wanted to create something original? Was that sort of a big push something that you really believed in that you wanted to explore, or was it more you were just kind of discovering things through experimentation?
Yeah, I was just discovering things through experimenting. I didn't have any intentions, or I wasn't trying too hard. It just kind of happened, which was the best way I think that kind of work comes about.
And again, it's a result of that making.
Yeah, exactly. And I did then find this this new mindset, which was there has been so many different forms of art, and we're seeing so much art these days that the prospect of originality seems quite impossible to get to. And there's quite a strong argument that there isn't much originality out there, but I think it is possible, and it has to be. Yeah, there are protocols though that an artist can utilize that likens the chance of creating original work. And a few of them I have used was one, making work in a vacuum and trying to refrain from taking influence and inspiration from other work, but also from a technical standpoint is creating. I would tend, especially with the impasto works, I would make my own palette knives and tools with the idea that if I've made this metal palette knife by hand, that the chances of someone else having the exact same tool is very slim.
Yeah.
And so I would do this with brushes as well, as I'm sure many artists have done, and same with the palette knives. But yeah, I think getting real creative, getting down to the fundamentals and trying to change them from the ground up as an artist is quite important. I think buying store-bought paintbrushes and palette knives, many artists create incredible works from that, but I think that can limit you in some ways.
It kind of insists that you work within a certain boundary.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That's so interesting, and it's very rare, I would say, for an artist to, make the frames and stretch the canvases onto the frame, and then you also make your frames, and then you make your tools, and then you probably actually experiment with the paint and the impasto and the quantities and all of that as well. Yeah. And then I know you use epoxy resin and other things in your work. So it is so, it feels like it's so sort of fresh and new and experimental. Do you think that has come from you being self-taught and sort of finding your own way?
Most likely, I think, yeah. If I was to have finished uni, I may be better off for it, or I may have been pushed into a certain way of doing things. With art, and I think learning about art history, that's valuable, and traditional techniques is valuable, but I think in terms of being creative and making art, I don't know if one is better off for being taught in a university or a school.
In a formal environment. It's a very interesting one, but I think it is inspiring to hear that you've come to such success from your own self-tuition.
Yeah, I've still got a long way to go. So I had this overall plan to create a show before I approached any galleries, and I spent maybe 2 years making 16 odd works. Once again, in more or less in staying as much away from other influences as possible. And
that work at that time, Josh, wasn't using any of these impasto techniques?
No, it was actually. It was when I initially discovered this technique, and the first few were, once again, large-scale works that I'd thrown myself into, but they were rough, and I still like that technique, but following it, each work kind of developed naturally, and then I got to this point where I was making these flower wheels, and then I put this into another large-scale portrait, which I'd never spent that much time on a work before. It was roughly 4 or 5 months, almost every day, working on this painting.
And is that one of the portraits with the flowers over the face?
No, that's the circular portrait that
with the flowers around the outside?
Yeah.
Right, yeah. Yes, I love that one.
Yeah. So I viewed that as a combination of everything that I had learned up to that point, which was this new technique and painting a realistic portrait, which I'm still quite happy with that work. I'm proud of it. And I then progressed and started making just kind of, they started off as random concepts, but I would always find a way to tie them into this theme of nature and this botanical theme. And yeah, I was doing portraits with traditional portraits with a floral background, fully painted in with a brush, and then also doing these abstract kind of impasto works that so I then had finally come to the point where I'd finished this group of work, and I made a portfolio, and I started to approach galleries, which I'd had no experience doing, but it was quite eye-opening in that about 95% of the galleries didn't reply or
really
never knew if they had even seen the portfolio.
Wow. And I bet they regret that now.
Well, I'm not sure about that, but yeah, I'd emailed virtually every gallery I could find in Auckland, and it was quite a nerve-wracking time.
Isn't that sad that they don't even respond sometimes?
Well, I'm sure they get tons of portfolios, still, and
if they understand artists, they know the anxiety behind, approaching a gallery like that.
Yeah, and you always hear that approaching in person is better, but I was a bit introverted at the time, and
you were emailing at that point?
Yeah, emailing, which I was a bit scared of walking into a gallery with a portfolio, but I think if I could do it again, I would do that.
And you had this lovely body of work that you could have brought in, and probably would have been a powerful way of approaching a gallery.
But it's tough with those large scale works, as they can't go anywhere until they're ready to go into a gallery. I can't exactly show up to the door with a 1.6 meter square painting. So near the end, about 45 galleries in, I found Flagstaff Gallery in Devonport, and that was an entirely different response I got from them. Carrie and Sophia responded fairly immediately, and there was a real sense of excitement, and they then asked to come and view the work in person. So they came round and saw everything, and they decided on 2 of the works that were most marketable in their opinion, which were the impasto flower, the abstract works. So those 2 went into the gallery, and then I got a call from Carrie about a week later saying that the response that I've had for those 2 paintings alone was overwhelming, and she wanted to then have everything, and we designed a solo show. So about 2-3 months into signing, I was having my own solo show, which was
amazing.
Yeah, it was incredible.
That is so great. And what year was that?
That was 2020, right before COVID.
Wow. I mean, you really it is quite early days in your career, isn't it? But you seem to be doing so well and gaining such momentum already.
Yeah, well, I hope so. It's hard to maintain at times, but you just got to keep working and focus on the one day at a time, the small things, rather than get wrapped up in this overall idea of success and money. And Yeah. So I had this exhibition, which was surreal, really. The opening night, I think the majority of the work sold, and for these
Really?
prices that I just never thought were possible.
Yeah, the
And
prices. And that, can we just touch on the pricing for a second?
yeah,
It is amazing that you are already commanding good prices for your work after a few, not a long career.
yeah,
It's incredible. I mean, congratulations. It's so, you must be so proud of that.
thank you.
And so, for example, the painting that we talked about earlier with the portrait in the middle with the flowers around the botanical features in impasto around in a circular, on a circle. That is priced at, am I allowed to say the price?
Yeah, sure.
At 50,000, isn't it? And that's at Turua Gallery, which we'll touch on.
Yeah.
We'll talk about Turua Gallery in a second. And then your works are really well priced, within that. So how does that pricing work, and how do you feel about it? Is it the gallery that's driving it, and then you're obviously selling work at those prices?
Yeah, so it was definitely a learning process, and that initial exhibition, I did 3 more of these color wheel impasto works for the exhibition. So there were 5 total, and they were all priced at 3,500. One was 5,500. And they went first. They were out the door. And then there was a wait list of about, I think, 10, 15 people wanting one.
Wow.
But considering how long they took, I think those were initially a little bit underpriced because I couldn't keep up with the commissions, and I ended up working too hard and developing RSI, and I had to take a break from them. But the other works I worked in tandem with a gallery and we figured out prices. But since then, I've kind of I've gotten comfortable with pricing work, and I understand what these works should be a little better. But sometimes you're just winging it, and if a work sells for a certain price, then it can be your new baseline.
Yeah Totally. Yeah, that's it. I mean, it's great that the Flagstaff Gallery really backed you in that way and sort of made sure that your prices were reflecting the work.
No, exactly. But I did have these realizations that reality kind of sunk in after that show, where I sold, I think, 15 out of 16, and I finally got the paycheck. But this realization that this was going to be a lot harder than I initially thought to be a successful artist and to be financially, self-sustaining. Because after gallery commission and material costs and everything, it wasn't even, I was a bit hard on myself back then, but it wasn't, at that point, it wasn't attainable. Like, I couldn't live off this money. So I had to kind of take a different view of the pricing and slowly, gradually, build up from there. But I've always, I've looked at the European art market and America and even Australia, and you see artworks for millions of dollars, and I think if someone can see how much hard work has gone into a work just by looking at it, it deserves a decent price tag. It's not all about money, and it shouldn't be, and it's hard not to get tied up with money as an artist, but selling work for a decent price kind of eliminates that stress of having to worry about paying for things, and everything. But I just think New Zealand's has a smaller art scene than other countries, and there are plenty of artists in New Zealand that deserve to sell their work for much higher than they do, but I think we might suffer in certain ways. Artists in New Zealand might, just due to the fact that we're a newer country and we don't have this rich history. Yeah.
It is amazing. I mean, it's very encouraging, I think, for people to hear, what can be achieved. And I think there are obviously the collectors out there because your work sold.
Yeah.
And those prices in that first solo exhibition were lower, but, you're still selling as you've sort of increased your prices. They're still selling, aren't they? So it goes to show, but it is about the type of work. And I think you're right that people are sort of happier, I guess, paying more when they can see the time that's gone into it and the skill.
Yeah.
Which is an interesting conversation anyway, isn't it? Like, is it about time? Is it about talent? Is it about how long you've been working? There's all these factors. Who knows what the answer is?
There's the old story of Picasso, who was approached in a restaurant and and he did the scribble on a bit of paper and asked for $1,000 to $2,000 or whatever. The customer complained and he said, that's not, 30 seconds worth of drawing, that's 80 years of practice. I think, refining your craft and spending less time in a work doesn't necessarily mean you're cutting quality or anything. You're just getting better at producing that kind of work. But I think that's key for being a successful artist. And I've seen that I've been to certain exhibitions where the work is incredible and they have a fairly high price tag and they're doing tons of work in a year or 10 months. And that's an artist that's honed their technique and their style, and they can keep a consistent quality, but also, earn a decent living from it.
And artists deserve that.
Yeah.
So in a relatively short amount of time, it seems like there's been so much learning and so much sort of figuring out, especially once you connected with Flagstaff Gallery.
Yeah.
So what happened after the solo show?
So I immediately took on 4 commissions, and that took me about 4 months to do. But I was too eager, and I was working too hard, and I burnt myself out, definitely, for the first time. And because these impasto works are so technical, they involve, minor sort of movements of the hand, and I developed this RSI just from doing the same repetitive motion again and again. So that was a valuable lesson where I had to take 3 or 4 months off and
off painting completely.
Yeah, completely. And over New Year's, and had to see hand therapists and all these different. But I eventually figured that out and figured out there were exercises and therapy that you can do to completely eliminate the possibility of that. But also, I learned that I can't be doing 12-hour days every day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you think it would help if you're doing different types of paintings?
Yeah. Yeah, it was just
mixing it up a bit.
Yeah, it was only because I picked up these 4 commissions and I had to do them back to back. But I'm glad that happened, even though it was rough. I learned a lot from that.
Yeah.
And then I took it easy for the next 6 to 8 months. I did a large work that took 4 months that was easy on my hands and everything, but also incredibly technical. It just involved brushes and woodworking and that. And then that was the end of 2020. And then 2021, I was the first year of Art in the Park, which was Carrie and Sophia's baby. They created that, which is incredible and has completely just, it's blown up, and it's so important for emerging artists and the art community as a whole. So for Art in the Park, I decided to try and learn a new medium altogether, which was epoxy molding. So I had this idea that, I'd looked at artists like Gillian Mark that create these sculptural works, but they can do, moldings of them, and they can create multiple of the same. So it was an idea that I tested out, but it was a roller coaster. I created a flower out of wood and in different parts, and I made silicone molds of these parts, and then casted with epoxy, and the whole process took months. I did 15 of these wallflowers, circular MDF board with a quite prominent flower in the center, 5 different colors, 3 of each color, and that was a real lesson, because Art in the Park, nothing sold, none of them.
Are you serious?
Yeah, none of them. They were, I think it was a combination of, they were probably priced a little too high. It was hard to figure out that, and I was completely on my own pricing them, which I got a bit greedy probably. But I did another work for that year, a lupin, which sold. But yeah, that was a real blow.
That must have been really tough.
Yeah.
Because you'd had so much success previously, you're probably feeling quite comfortable and confident.
Yes, but it was a good thing.
Yeah.
I needed to be, I think, experience some real failure, and that was a lot of money in comparison to oil painting. Epoxy's not cheap, silicone isn't either, and a lot of time. And also I had 15 of these works that couldn't be stacked.
Yes.
I had to store. So I took that on the chin, and I mean, eventually over the years, I think 11 of them have sold. So they're finally going, and I've gifted some to family, and they were a good lesson. I mean, learning how to mold and cast was important, and I'll probably go back to that in the future, but it rubs me the wrong. I think it was a little cheap of me to want to, create these works that were all fairly similar, just with the idea of, that was a lesson in like not chasing profit, for example.
But I guess I can understand why you felt like that could work, because your other flower wheels with the impasto had all, so many people wanted those.
Yeah.
So I can understand that you might think, okay, that's kind of that sort of idea, just shift it up a bit, and it's going to be really, really popular in the same way. And
this was a technique which, alongside that impasto, that I'd also developed, which was stacking MDF and using thin layers of MDF to create, sculptured work, basically, and kind of like a, topographical map. And, it took a long time to develop that. And so I figured, why wouldn't it work? But it was very risky, but a lot of my other work but this was the first time that it really, really failed. Yeah. But
good lesson, as you say.
Yeah, very
And
good.
do you think it might have been partly the Art in the Park sort of audience wasn't your audience, or have you got any ideas, especially now that they've actually sold a lot of them? Have you got any ideas why they didn't at Art in the Park?
I think it was pricing, because they've sold, but for a quarter of what I priced them. Yeah. And eventually I kind of just wanted them. I needed the space.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was a good lesson in pricing, and also I bit off a little more than I could chew there. I spent too much time on that, and I should have just done a group of 3 or 5 instead of going all in on this idea.
Yeah.
And, you know, that was the first time that I'd actually kind of taken a concept that I'd seen before, like first time in a while that I'd taken this concept of moldings and recreating, you know, the same kind of sculptural work that other artists can do, but maybe one day, but I don't know. Yeah.
So you feel like you've come to the end of that part of your practice?
Well, I don't know.
For now?
Because it's a very exciting process, and I do enjoy it. I just think the concept overall was a bit lazy from me. So yeah, that happened.
It doesn't sound lazy to me.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Also, epoxy is pretty stressful to work with.
Yeah,
that kind of epoxy.
It is.
You know, you have to be so careful and always wear a mask and cover your skin, and
it can be unpredictable.
Yeah, exactly. And you can get chemical reactions and all sorts of things, but very pricey as well. So maybe I'll come back to that one day, but that was, a blessing and a curse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great learning in the journey, as they say.
Yeah.
And we can come back and talk about the process a little bit more for those ones. So you didn't feel too dejected after that show, I hope?
No, that was comforting in the sense that I wasn't completely demotivated. It was, I was realistic, and I knew that I'd made some wrong moves, and that wasn't the end of the world. So going back before Art in the Park, I'd done a exhibition with Flagstaff Gallery of 5 large oil on board paintings, the same impasto technique, but this time I'd chosen specific flowers and done impressionist paintings on them, and just used that opportunity to experiment and to try and create different shapes and whatnot with these palette knives, because with a palette knife you're kind of restricted with the amount of, and especially in this technique, you're restricted with the amount of shapes you can make, and you know there's certain angles you can't make without in this clean fashion that that is the style. But with these 5 paintings, conveniently the palette knife does resemble a petal. Yeah. So although it's limiting in that it can only make a certain shape, you can actually create all sorts of different flowers. And there are other techniques like piping that I've used, and masking certain areas so that you can create large leaves, and so that was a good experiment, and has also led into a lot of the work I make today, which is using new floral subject matter and just aiming to put my own twist on it, but create these different flowers. And it's fairly limitless in that, there are lots of different flowers out there.
Yeah. Well, you've got like a very broad theme, but then all the different techniques and approaches and the way that you use composition and space and colour, it does feel like there's so many variables that you've got like a lifetime to explore. Yeah,
and since then I've, obviously been making the frames and the boards as well, and spray painting everything, which that has gotten a lot, they used to be pretty rough jobs, and from a distance they would be patchy, but figuring out that part of the process as well, and how to make a clean board, and these different, I tend to add a more saturated frame on a more pastel-y background, but the same color. So it'll be a pastel pink background, and then a fluorescent pink frame, or green or yellow. I've always enjoyed making the work from scratch. I find it a lot more fulfilling to have actually created this entire thing from a sheet of MDF and some pine, And yeah, I mean, it takes away from time that could be spent painting, but also I can, I can control the quality of the work, and I know that it is at a high standard, rather than, paying for someone to make the frames, or, you don't know their process in and out.
And it just feels like just the beginning of your process. It's an important part of what you do. And like you say, that's when you first are invested into that work.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I think inevitably one day I'll probably have to give that part up. But yeah, it does connect me a lot more with the work.
Well, even if you have someone that you train who works for you, then that quality control might be easier.
Yeah. It can tie you down making your own frames. You need the tools, and I've been lucky enough that my dad used to be a builder, and he has the bench saw and the drop saw and routers and that. So moving somewhere or going overseas, it's going to make things a lot, you're probably going to be restricted in that manner. But yeah, no, I'm lucky to have always been around tools and figured out, that part of the process.
And you've got that sort of perfectionism possibly from your dad. Builders often do have that, everything has to be perfectly finished.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think he does have a bit of that.
And how do your parents feel about what you're doing?
They have been incredible. Yeah. They've always supported me. And even early on, when I think most parents would be a bit skeptical, when their son wants to drop out of uni to paint, but they were always, they didn't try and turn me away from the idea or demotivate me or anything. They were always there. And I think the moment the solo show was really the moment that they realized becoming a professional artist is possible. And since then, they're probably my biggest supporters. Mum's quite secretive with it, but I know she talks a lot about it to her friends.
I bet she does.
Yeah.
She'll be proud mama.
No, it's
How old are you?
I'm 27. Yeah.
Yeah, that's very cool. We do. We've sort of slightly gone off topic there, but it's lovely to hear those stories of parents and the support that they have given you, and given you that sort of self-belief, I guess.
Yeah.
Which is great.
I wouldn't be doing this without them.
So we go back to the second art in the park. I'd love to know what you made for that and how it went.
That was a fairly similar situation.
Really?
I had the measurements for the walls, and I decided to create 2 large oil paintings that fit the walls perfectly, that took up the entire space. I want it to be an immersive kind of stall. I had the right idea, I think, with those 2 paintings, and they were a pair. So there was a winter and a summer, and they were fairly similar impasto designs, but more of a blank background and then a window of leaves and flowers. And I did them both at the same time, and they took maybe 2 months, but come the show, they didn't sell. And I also had another big piece there that was valued highly, and that didn't sell. But yeah, that was a less of a hit on my confidence. And eventually I did just sell one of them. The other one is at Flagstaff still. But that was another lesson actually in size. And these were 1.5 meter square paintings that only certain people can have in their homes, in certain homes. And yeah, I don't regret making them. I think there's definitely a home out there for them. But yeah, it's also been good to have these failures, which are not exactly, they feel like failures in the moment, but they really keep you grounded.
Yeah, and they make you think. I think a failure is something that makes you sort of assess what you're doing and just stand back and regroup and modify if necessary and all those great things.
Yeah. And I've since done a work similar to that, but it was just the center, and it was a 80 by 80 centimeter on board and for a Flagstaff show, and it sold opening night. So it's very similar to those works, but without the background and the luggage of having this huge artwork to hang on your wall.
Yeah. And Art in the Park, which is, for those people who don't know, is a show that has a lot of artists involved, and it's at Eden Park in Auckland.
Yeah.
And it probably is quite accessible for artists to be able to actually show there, and it's also quite accessible for people to come and have a look. And possibly the audience is less highbrow gallery kind of audience, which might be a sort of factor in what sells. And I have heard from people that sometimes having more work at a cheaper has worked better for them in that environment, but who knows?
Yeah, it's interesting. A lot of work is on the lower end, sub 5,000, but then there are some artists and some works that, Matt Griffin has sold 2 years in a row, high priced work, and this year I sold a decently priced work, but it's I think more rare than your high end gallery.
But it's a great show, and it's a really popular event.
Yeah, I think it's pretty special and very helpful for emerging artists and young artists in general.
Yeah, definitely. And you are also represented by Turua Gallery, which is in St Heliers. Mm-hmm. How did that come about?
Well, funnily enough, Melissa Wallace, who runs Turua, actually came to view my work back in, must have been 2019, when I'd created this big group of work for a solo show. And she came to view everything, and she was so kind and supportive, and told me that she would have the work any day, but it's a matter of space. And I've always kind of kept that in my mind. And earlier last year, I figured that because I was in Devonport mainly exhibiting work, that it would be worthwhile to expose more of Auckland, to my work. And Melissa was amazing. She, straight away, she was keen. And it's been a short but exciting time at Turua. Yeah, she's very connected to the community, and the gallery has a very different feel to it, and that their shows are very community. They're community based, and it's her presence on social media is pretty unique for a gallery. Yeah, from what I've seen.
Well, they're great, aren't they? Her and Dean.
Yeah,
and they really they create a sort of sense of sort of whānau almost with their artists, and they've really sort of made me feel like part of that family, which is really lovely. And she actually recommended that I talk to you. Just it's a lovely vibe that they've made there at Turua Gallery.
And she's great at what she does and very easy to talk to, and so is Dean.
Yeah, well, that's great. And how do you find juggling two Auckland galleries? Has that ever become a problem?
No, not really. I've had one of those big pieces from Art in the Park at Flagstaff for a while now. I did a piece in December for Flagstaff and did 4 for Turua, but I think 2 is manageable. I was warned not to take on too many because you're stretching yourself too thin, but no, I think
that works.
2 is very manageable.
Yeah. And do they have sort of different expectations or different types of your work that they prefer, or is it kind of across the board?
They're both very relaxed. I mean, there's no pressure to create work, or I kind of put that on myself mainly. Yeah. But I have plenty of work that hasn't been exhibited that I can approach them with, and they're always willing to, hang it in the gallery.
So good. And are you thinking about other parts of New Zealand and even internationally showing your work?
Yeah, I think not so much New Zealand, but I visited Melbourne last year for that purpose, to approach galleries and check out the city. And I have some friends living there, and I was blown away by how many galleries they have. It's a whole different art scene. And I've got some offers from galleries there. It's just a bit tricky shipping work, even though it's not a huge distance, insurance and everything. Shipping these bigger works is kind of pretty unrealistic.
And you have to pay that, not the gallery.
Yeah. No, I do. So I think, a lot of artists do it. I'm sure it's possible, but being in the city and creating work there is the most realistic, situation.
It's very exciting. I feel like the world's your oyster, really. I really feel like you're going to go big and get your work out there across the world. Yeah. Somehow. It's just working out how to do it.
Yeah, I think especially with the textural work that can't be rolled up in a tube and shipped. It has to be...
It's expensive.
Yeah.
We cannot go past speaking about your process, which is pretty fascinating. So you've kind of touched on some of the parts of your process already, but can you talk to us first about the process of your impasto paintings?
So this process in particular is quite protective over a little bit, I guess.
Fair
Only
enough.
because I don't think I've produced all the work I can in this. But apart from, making my own tools and just being persistent, I've never been able to explain it that well, because it did just happen, and there was no blueprint for it. I kind of just stumbled across it, but it's gotten to the point where I know now that it is a fairly unique technique. I haven't really seen work to this day done in the same way. So in terms of color palettes and subject matter, the color composition comes naturally, and subject matter is anything that I find overly unique and that is possible to paint in this style. There are some flowers that are virtually impossible to do. But yeah, in terms of the paint itself, I have gotten, I've realized that there is a certain viscosity that works best, and you need to mix no more than 30-40% medium with each color blob. But I'll mix up each all the colors for a painting in one go, and as I progress through a painting, there'll be subtle changes, but it is very methodical in some ways. There is a certain order that it needs to be done in, and with a circular geometric flower, it has to be done from the outside in. With a stem, that has to be done first, and some take a lot longer than others. But the symmetrical ones, some of them they need guidance. They need a SketchUp or mainly just measurements for reference. But any more abstract kind of flower, I will either wing it or do a rough SketchUp and then a precise drawing on top of it. But I've realized that doing a bright outline of the drawing underneath works best for me. It makes it easier when you're adding layers upon layers.
And so you've got your background paint down already, and you're drawing on top of that.
The spray painting is always first, and then from there it's easier to choose a color palette. Yeah. That's also something that's taken years to figure out, is what colors work best, and it is an endless lesson, you know.
Your petals do have different shapes and sizes, so are you actually making different tools for the different petals, or you have a whole range of different sized palette knives that you've created yourself?
A lot of the larger ones can be done with a single palette knife, and it's more muscle memory in the way that it's like the arcs of the hand. It is simple, but it's
precise,
hard to learn. You know, I've tried to show friends and that, and it's pretty difficult to like, mainly to keep a steady hand, and any movement, any shake shows in a line, like a, you know.
What do you do if you've made a mistake? Can you get it off?
Oh yeah, I can scrape it off or go over it. But working wet on wet paint is the easiest. If an impasto painting takes more than a week, it starts to get difficult, because you have to have a completely clean surface before adding extra layers. Because as the paint dries, it'll whatever's underneath will show through. So if there's dried paint in a bunch underneath, it will show through the next petal if it's not cleaned up.
Yeah.
But that's all just admin, really.
It's quite tricky, isn't it? And do you actually mix the impasto with the oil paint before you apply? Have you ever thought about doing impasto and then painting on top?
I've thought about doing like a modeling paste and then painting it, but I have experimented with that, but I think having a clean color and then applying it in itself is the cleanest way of doing that, I've found. And it does, once it's dried, it with the impasto medium, it kind of creates its own protection for the paint, and it's a satisfying thing to touch once it's all dried. Yeah, and
I guess the ratios are pretty important, or it doesn't end up drying how you want it.
Yeah, I mean, the only risk is mixing too little and then it taking months to dry, but yeah.
So interesting. And a big part of your practice is the smoothness, isn't it, of the petals? That's and the sort of gloss or the texture that you get with that.
Yeah.
Which is clever.
Any kind of imperfection I usually try and remove or start again, because that does come down to that is part of the style now, and I can't, if I started to rush the work, the imperfections would show, and if I kept them in, then it wouldn't be the work that people are wanting.
Yeah, and what you're wanting too, I imagine.
Exactly.
Yeah. And do you, when you're managing your different colours, do you have a whole bunch of pots made up with the different colours and the impasto, and then you apply sort of different colours? I mean, as you go around your circle with your petals, they're not always the same colour all the way around. So
no, they're usually,
how do you manage that?
They're usually a gradient. Some of the colour mixing is more mathematical, it seems, than anything, because you can't see the variations in colour with your naked eye. You kind of have to just mix 50% of, so I'll do maybe 10 different shades of blue from light to dark, and then try and find an in-between colour for each of those 10. So you're ending up with 19 and you kind of just have to trust the process in a lot of ways. And but in terms of the paint, I have these little covers and I'll mix up a blob of paint and cover it. Usually I can get it all done before it starts to dry, but a lot of the time I'll keep the colors as a kind of color history. If I do have a mistake down the line, or I need to, for whatever reason, find compare one color to another, I'll have a history of that, which is useful. And keeping oil paint's covered overnight, just delays dry time. And, yeah.
And then you take the colour and then just mix it with some impasto on your palette and apply it.
Yeah.
So you don't make up lots of impasto and oil painting pots.
No, it's a time-consuming process to have 12 different colours and mix 50% or 40% impasto with each one of them. Mix it thoroughly. It can be, to start your day doing that sometimes.
It's tedious.
Yeah, it is.
And then it could end up, not lasting as well, or it could end up wasting some. Yeah.
I try to limit waste, but it is pretty inevitable.
It's an amazing process. I mean, you really have captured something so unique, which is really exciting. How do you think you'd feel if you found on Instagram somebody doing very similar work?
I'd be intrigued, I think. I'd want to know about their process. Yeah. And I think I could tell if it was similar. Yeah. I mean, I had a guy recently kind of demanding that I had to show him how it's done, and I had to politely say sorry. But no, if I saw that work, I'd be intrigued to learn something from it.
And hopefully you won't see work that is actually just a copy of yours.
No, I mean, maybe.
It might happen.
Maybe.
I don't know what you can do about that. I mean, you can't really copyright technique or style, can you?
No.
Yeah.
That's why I'm fairly secretive about the actual detailed process. And
But you are very generous showing your process on Instagram, you know, parts of your process, which is really intriguing and great to watch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think it is important. And you're not really going to grow a whole lot on social media without sharing some kind of insight into your process.
And I think with your process, it is so original that I'd imagine there's even more fascination for how you work.
Yeah, Instagram is a tough beast, though.
Yes, yeah. How do you manage it? I mean, because you do seem like you're quite present in Instagram.
Yeah, I mean, that is more work a lot of the time than anything. It is necessary, and if you spend too long away from Instagram, you're kind of secretly punished for it, I think, in the algorithm. And I remember the early days, it was when everyone's feed was chronological and you'd see everything, but nowadays it's mainly ads. It's
it really is.
You're missing out on your friends' posts and whatnot. And as an art, like, unless you're creating popular reels, it is quite hard to capture people's attention and to
get yourself seen,
even get on people's feeds.
Yes, and whether it's stories or posts or reels, I'm never quite sure.
They say it's reels these days.
Yeah. I think the good thing about reels is that they kind of stay out there, so suddenly you'll get some sort of response from a reel that you'd made ages ago.
Yeah.
Which wouldn't happen with a post.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it adds this whole different world that you have to learn about, which is like video editing and understanding what works and the algorithm, and it's quite overwhelming in a lot of ways.
It is. And it's so time consuming. Yeah. And you've got to kind of juggle your priorities, but you still need to do that. But it's something I think every guest I've spoken to has struggled with. So you do sell, just sticking with the Instagram idea, you do sometimes sell through Instagram or get commissions through Instagram. How does that work for you?
Pretty naturally a lot of the time. I usually just get approached by people, and I had my biggest sale actually beginning of last year was through Instagram to a lady down south, and it was seamless. The work wasn't even finished, and she contacted me saying, I want first dibs, and yeah, she was authentic, but a lot of the time it is commissioned work. Recently I've done a bunch of small impasto work, and they've all sold through Instagram, which has taught me a lot about shipping and managing that whole process yourself and packaging the work. And yeah, but that is useful to kind of take out the middleman and earn some more money as a result.
Yeah. And your galleries don't have any issue with you selling yourself?
No.
Which is good.
Yeah.
Sometimes that does happen, doesn't it?
Really?
I think so.
Yeah.
I could be wrong. Yeah.
I wouldn't be too surprised.
I think some galleries like you to kind of pass your potential customer back to your gallery. Yeah.
Yeah.
You enjoy working with wood and have that great setup that your dad has provided, which is good. Thank you, Dad. And you've created these other sculptural works that we spoke of earlier that you showed at Art in the Park. So how did you actually go about making those separate moulds, and what were you using?
So I had the idea years ago now that, I was thinking of different ways to create a sculpture that could also hang on a wall and be attached to a board. And obviously wood was the most realistic option. There was the option of, carving into a solid object or building up something. And that gained my curiosity. And I figured using 3mm MDF, and as long as I could figure out a process for layering, I could then make a flower, say, by building up from the bottom layer all the way up to the top. And it was quite intricate. I had to obviously label each petal and number each layer of MDF, but with a lot of hours on the jigsaw, I figured out this process. And it was time consuming. It involved firstly layering up maybe sometimes 20 layers of MDF, and it got very intricate near the top, and then sanding it down, filling in all the gaps with builder's bog or modeling paste, using the Dremel to then carve out the internal curves and everything, and
wow.
And then getting everything smooth though was honestly it was a nightmare at times. But that's what I did with this epoxy project. But instead of gluing everything together, I left them in 5 different layers. The easiest, because making it a whole flower and having these deep gaps along the sides like a normal flower would, there's no way for the silicone to reach these parts, and it wouldn't have worked. So doing 5 different parts was the only way it could be done. And yeah, I made these molds and used a deep pour epoxy to cast 15 times over for each mold, and then
wow,
tried to figure out a way to merge the epoxy layers together. And there was too much epoxy for me.
Yeah,
it was quite stressful.
It is hard, and it's because that's a resin, isn't it? Epoxy. Yeah. And it does have a mind of its own at times, and things like temperature and humidity and are all factors which can be problematic.
And it's toxic.
Yeah.
Especially if you're using something that has VOC, which I still don't know what that means, but I know that no VOC is what you want. But yeah, even though it smells like nothing, it can be very dangerous.
Yeah, it's it's very toxic.
But I see artists that coat their work, like a Australian artist, Nick Tom, and he does these huge paintings, covers them in a layer of epoxy with no mask. So he must be using some new type, some low VOC.
You'd hope so.
Epoxy, yeah.
Yeah. And what is it, do you think, that you're sort of drawn to with this kind of connection and combination of sculpture and painting?
I think more than anything, it's a unique idea. I haven't seen too many wall sculptures that are also oil paintings, and I have a large unfinished one at home that I need to get back to. But yeah, the whole concept itself is it's exciting because I haven't seen it, and I'm sure it's been done before, but with developments in technology and materials and mediums, there are a lot of things that are now possible. I think that didn't used to be. I think MDF is probably the best type of, well, it's not really but best type of material to use for these sculptures, because it's predictable, and it is full of resin, and I know it's going to last.
Yeah, that's a big consideration, isn't it? You have that other technique of making a beautiful painted portrait, and then either putting flowers above the face or over the face, and that is it's so intricate, and they're so striking and so incredibly unexpected and beautiful. And you sold one of those big ones at Art in the Park last year.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't actually see your stall. I was there last year.
It was a courtyard one. It was opposite. It was in the centre. It had just a single painting.
I missed it, I think. Can you talk to us about that technique?
Yeah, so that was with the same idea of creating a wall sculpture. So with MDF, you can only attach it to a wood background, and it's incredibly heavy. These paintings, they're on canvas, and the technique is I use modeling paste and pipe it through bags to build up layers, kind of like I got the idea from a 3D printer that builds up, a wall and then creates structure in the center. And it's very challenging because you have to figure out the high points of a flower or a leaf or whatnot, and always keep them in mind as you're adding more depth to the painting. But that is a new technique I think I will be sticking with for a long time.
That's really beautiful.
It's acrylic modeling paste, which is fast drying, and that's the base layer, and then impasto oils over the top.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. And it is, I understand what you're saying, that sort of idea of building from the bottom and sort of being able to visualize how the top will look in sort of relation to everything else. Must be really quite tricky.
Yeah, but I think it's worth the effort, given that these are going to be on canvas, and I think it's much more unique to have this kind of sculptural work done on an actual cotton canvas.
Yeah, it's really beautiful to have that contrast.
Yeah, there was some risk in the weight and what effect it would have on the canvas, but as long as there are certain precautions you can take, and stretching the certain areas that the weight is going to be at, stretching them a little more and making
That's really interesting. And it's great, again, that you're making your own stretches and canvases.
Yeah, it does help.
So that you understand what's required. Yeah. And have you ever thought about using a 3D printer to create some of your parts?
I find 3D printers fascinating, and same with CNC routers. But I do prefer the handmade approach. I think in the future maybe it would be useful for creating certain works. But I think it takes away from that handmade or original feel that an oil painting has.
Yeah. I guess you could actually use it as another sort of aspect to your practice.
Yeah, it could be.
And it could be sort of a different, I mean, you're still making the design, it's still you. It's just another tool, I guess.
Yeah, no, that is true. It could be done alongside the oil painting.
Yeah, and knowing you'll probably use the 3D printer in a sort of original way and create something that's your own anyway. Yeah. Do you actually make prints of these works?
Some of them, yeah. 6 total of the impasto works, and I've had the 2 botanical portraits, cordyceps paintings photographed professionally, but prints, I find quite a stressful process. I learnt the hard way that you don't really get a huge bunch of them printed and hope to sell. You should be doing them on demand. But I've found the right printer now, and he's great. So I think it's more finding the right concepts that I think would be popular as prints. Some of the works don't really translate well.
No. Because a lot of people love the textural element, I guess, of your work.
And the photographer who photographed the original 3 flower wheels, I think you've had him on here.
John Botton.
John Botton?
Yeah, from Print Art.
Yeah. He did an amazing job of photographing these works, and with the way the lights were, and they look like 3D, like paintings, even though they're printed on, cotton rag.
He's a very clever guy.
Yeah.
Oh, that's good that you can do that. There would be a market for it, I imagine.
Yeah.
So, Josh, we've been chatting away for ages. We've had a power cut as we've been speaking. Lots of traffic noise because it's holiday time and everyone's going to the beach. So hopefully that's not too annoying to listen to. So let's get on to the questions, shall we?
Yep.
Are we ready?
Sounds good. Yep.
What would you say to your younger artistic self?
I would advise to not get too tied up on making things perfect, and to instead focus on just experimentation and producing as much work as possible.
And which artists inspire you most?
There are 2 kind of different genres of artists that inspire me. One are the more the masterful kind of technical painters, like Marco Grassi, who's a hyper-realistic painter. Ivan Elefan, who's a Russian painter working in America, who has a mastery of color and works in impastos as well, and heavy texture and real experimental. And then Heinrich Ulladan, who's a Norwegian artist working in London, and he's got a darker tone to his work, but a mix between realism and abstraction and heavy texture, and he's got a real grasp of what mediums can do, and he's very he's very experimental again. And also, on the other hand, artists like CJ Hendry, who's a Australian artist, who kind of has really cracked the marketing side of things, and she has successfully adopted these molding processes and can create recreations and makes these incredible interactive exhibitions, and hires out these amazing spaces and does scavenger hunts for her followers and all these. I mean, it's different, but it is it's very impressive, and her work is stunning, and she's a hyper-realistic drawer as well. Yeah.
What would you say is your biggest challenge as an artist?
I would say staying focused on the craft itself, and not getting tied up by the idea of producing what the public would like, rather than making work that I want to make. I think it's hard to not be, for lack of a better word, corrupted by the money and chasing, commissions and that kind of thing. But yeah, to separate the two, the financial and the commission side of things, and then the protecting the personal art that I think every artist values the most.
Mm. And why do you think you make the kind of work that you make?
I've always loved nature, and I've admired more like the composition of a flower and the overall concept. And yeah, I think artists for potentially tens of thousands of years, since the original cave paintings, have painted nature, and I think it's a great starting point. It's great subject matter, and nature was the original artist. So I will be sticking with this theme for a while to come. But yeah, I think there's no better way to start as an artist. If there are younger artists out there struggling to start, I think that is a solid
starting point. And such amazing inspiration in nature, which many artists use. And just another cheeky question: where do you see yourself going in the future as far as technique goes, but also in what you'd like to achieve?
Well, I feel like the past 5 years I have been developing these techniques that are very intricate, but also when they're laid out as a painting, they're not that thought-provoking, I feel, or psychological. I would love to then come to a point where I can pivot and start making deeper work that has meaning behind it, but also utilizes these techniques. There's an artist, Miles Johnson, who's a illustrator, but he creates these real psychological surrealist drawings that you take one look at them and you know what he's trying to say. I've always admired that work, and it is, I think, the hardest art to make in a lot of ways. So yeah, I strive to move towards that point in the future.
And I'm sure there's going to be other techniques that you explore as well.
Hopefully.
Other mediums and yeah. Because you do seem innovative as an artist.
Thank you. Yeah, I think being exposed to new processes and that will help. And working with new artists or industrial designers or whatever could open new doors. Definitely.
Oh, well, I feel like there's a massive future for you. You're only 27. You've got so much time to achieve your dreams, which I feel sure you will.
Thank you.
It's been a real pleasure meeting you and having you here at Muriwai, and I hope you can go for a swim. You deserve it. So thank you very, very much for being on the podcast.
No, Josh. It was a pleasure, and thank you for having me.